year ago, Paul O'Neill was fired from his job as George Bush's Treasury Secretary for disagreeing too many times with the president's policy on tax cuts. Tonight, O'Neill, who is known for speaking his mind, talks for the first time about his 2 years inside the Bush administration. His story is the centerpiece of a new book being published this week about the way the Bush White House is run. Entitled The Price of Loyalty, the book, by a former Wall Street Journal reporter, draws on interviews with high-level officials who gave the author their personal accounts of meetings with the president, their notes and documents. But the main source of the book was Paul O'Neill. Paul O'Neill says he's going public because he thinks the Bush administration has been too secretive about how decisions have been made.
Contrary to how we practice politics today in this country, there is some market for the truth.
You interviewed how many other people?
Oh, hundreds of people.
Hundreds?
Hundreds of people.
How many other cabinet members?
Several. Let's just say several.
But O'Neill is the only one who spoke on the record. Didn't someone in this administration, high up, call him on the phone and warn him not to do this book?
Yes, yes.
And who was it?
Don Rumsfeld.
And what happened at President Bush's very first National Security Council meeting is one of O'Neill's most startling revelations.
From the very beginning, there was a conviction that Saddam Hussein was a bad person and that he needed to go.
He says that going after Saddam Hussein was topic A 10 days after the inauguration, 8 months before September 11th.
From the very first instance, it was about Iraq. It was about what we can do to change this regime.
Now, everybody else thought that grew out of 9/11.
No.
But this book says it was day one of this administration.
Day one, these things were laid and sealed.
As Treasury Secretary, O'Neill was a permanent member of the National Security Council. He says in the book he was surprised at the meeting that questions such as why Saddam and why now were never asked. It's all about finding a way to do it. That was the tone of it. The president saying, go find me a way to do this.
Okay, we just heard from a former National Security Council member how Bush ordered his Security Council to, quote, find me a way to do this. Translation being, carry out the planning and the plunder of Iraq. Remove Saddam from power. And directly hereafter, we will hear the motive.
For me, the notion of preemption, that the U.S. has the unilateral right to do whatever we decide to do, is a really huge leap.
And that came up at this first meeting.
It did.
O'Neill told us the discussion of Iraq continued at the next National Security Council meeting 2 days later. He got briefing materials under this cover sheet.
There are memos. One of them, marked secret, says, plan for post-Saddam Iraq.
And note the name of the bank on this leaked Pentagon document, which we will tie to other evidence later on.
Nation building.
Absolutely.
So they discussed an occupation of Iraq.
In January and February of 2001.
Based on his interviews with O'Neill and several other officials at the meetings, Susskind writes that the planning envisioned peacekeeping troops, war crimes tribunals, and even divvying up Iraq's oil wealth. Susskind obtained this Pentagon document, dated March 5, 2001, entitled Foreign Suitors for Iraqi Oil Field Contracts. It includes a map of potential areas for exploration.
It talks about contractors around the world from, 30, 40 countries, and which ones have what intentions or
on oil
in Iraq.
During the campaign, candidate Bush had criticized the Clinton-Gore administration for being too interventionist.
If we don't stop extending our troops all around the world in nation-building missions, then we're going to have a serious problem coming down the road, and I'm going to prevent that.
The president had just run a campaign about being humble and not engaging in nation building.
The thing that's most surprising, I think, is how emphatically, from the very first, this administration had said X during the campaign, but from the first day was often doing Y, not just saying Y, but actively moving toward the opposite of what they had said during the election.
Those pesky FBI agents almost foiled their plans. Here, we'll show how.
In July 2001, Ken Williams of the Phoenix FBI office wrote a now-famous memo to headquarters suggesting a nationwide program to keep tabs on suspicious flight school students. But the suggestion was suppressed before 9/11 by the FBI's Radical Fundamentalism Unit, where Michael Maltby, Marion Bowman, and unit head David Frasca all had access to it. Shortly afterward, in August of 2001, the Minneapolis FBI field office questioned recently arrested Zacarias Moussaoui, later alleged to be the 20th hijacker. As the investigation intensified in the weeks before 9/11, one Minneapolis agent claimed he was worried Moussaoui might try to fly a hijacked airliner into the World Trade Center. But the Minneapolis investigation was so vigorously blocked that agents joked Osama bin Laden must have a mole at FBI headquarters.
He had a mole in the White House.
Once again, it was Michael Maltby, Marion Bowman, and David Frasca who played a role in the obstruction. All three had knowledge of the Phoenix memo at the time, yet none of them told anyone in the Minneapolis office about it prior to 9/11. After 9/11, badly shaken, Wright wrote a 500-page book detailing his experience. But to this day, the FBI has blocked him from publishing it in full. Was Wright's terminated investigation related to the 199I order of January 2001?
Of course it's related. The supposedly disinterested FBI agents were not waiting for someone to arrest. They were making sure their operatives weren't exposed or arrested. The role of the flight school students was simply to make it appear as if Arab extremists had planned the attacks. As many as 9 have turned up alive. Several have good jobs, even pilots, and couldn't have taken time out from their personal and private lives to participate. This is supported by reports that several had been victims of identity theft, the lack of any flight manifest with an Arab name, the lack of any terminal video showing any hijacker boarding any of the flights, the 2 flights that did exist. That is why W himself issued the 199 IWF order, threatening the FBI agents with arrest. If the flight school students had been exposed before the attacks could take place, their plans would be foiled, as there would be no patsies.
Working in the translation office of the FBI after 9/11, Sibel Edmonds discovered evidence of rampant internal corruption and criminal conspiracy to cover up advance information about 9/11. Placed under a gag order by the Justice Department, Edmonds has been denied the opportunity to tell her story in full, but she has courageously found ways to get word of her ordeal out to the public. She has joined with the 9/11 Truth Movement and has not wavered in her claims.
To become an American citizen, I took the citizenship oath. In taking this oath, I pledged that I would support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Therefore, not only do I have the right to challenge John Ashcroft's anti-Constitution and un-American actions, as an American citizen, I am required to do so. So are you.
The 11 Commission report fails to mention anything at all about Robert Wright. Sibel Edmonds and Colleen Rowley are each mentioned just once, in footnotes that reveal nothing about what they said. Also unmentioned in the report are David Frasca, Marion Bowman, and Michael Maltby, the officials who should rightly have to answer why these investigations were apparently blocked.
Yes, they should have to answer, and absent any logical explanation, they should be placed in front of a firing squad after being tried for treason. And here's evidence of personal, political, and financial gain for their role in stifling the investigation into the flight school students that could have and would have stopped the attacks.